Aloha nerds and welcome back to the Salawog's Why It's Great Gut Reaction. The goal of this show is for me, Matthew Salanoa, filmmaker of 17 years, to celebrate movies that I enjoy or find that there's something worth talking about. So here today I'm doing a little bit of a holiday catch-up. Forgive me for those who have subscribed. I'm very grateful for the new subscribers. Up to 231 or 234. I can't believe it. I still believe most of you are bots, but if you're not a bot, then thank you very much for watching. So this is a little bit of a holiday catch-up, so I'm just going to bang through some reviews real fast, but these movies that I've seen recently I think are totally worth talking about, and let's get to it. So, let's see, what did I see? I've done a Final Cut review for Craving already. So those of you who saw or are hesitant to see Craven the Hunter, I already have a review.
And then you got the Foreigner. This guy's power is just the dissolve effect in editing. One. Just so that he can stand behind them and shoot them. What?
Where I basically suffer through watching that movie. So, that's an hour long of me going, So if you want to see my thoughts on Craven, it's over there. On the Salawog's Final Cut, I talk about movies, and then I also say how I think the movie could be improved with a couple days of shooting and some editing. But yeah, so if you're looking for thoughts on Craven the Hunter, it's over there. There's a lot of me screaming and crying and being angry at Sony, stuff like that. Passionate, lots of passion. But also, I had the pleasure of watching Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in theaters. Saw that the other day with my friend and her son. And I have to say, it was kind of nice seeing Craven, a movie that was really bad. It was a bad movie. No way to cut that. No way to look at it in any other form. It's a bad movie. Poorly done. Except for the first 10 minutes. But then Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which was a kids movie and very much made for kids. I mean, the audience was clearly in the mind of the filmmakers because the movie moves very fast. It doesn't take much time with the characters. It actually has very little character at all for anybody. But it's made at such a brisk pace that this modern era of kid who has a shorter attention span than ever can watch it. And granted, my friend's son enjoyed it. But actually, I did enjoy it myself. It was made well enough. You know, they had their little character arcs, and more than anything, I think the payoffs are what worked story-wise for that movie. I thought there's some setups that are so on the nose and obvious, and you've seen them before, but the payoffs of those setups were very nicely done. I actually have not seen Sonic 1 or 2. Actually, I never even played the game as a kid. I didn't have a Sega. My cousins had a Sega. I had the Nintendo. I had the Super Nintendo. My family could only afford 5 games, so I only played Super Mario Bros. And Tank Wars for the longest time. And Sarge's Heroes. But, you know, going into Sonic the Hedgehog 3, you know, they make it so you can just walk into the movie. So for those of you who haven't seen 1 or 2 and you're thinking about taking your kids or just to see it yourself because you want to have a little good time because Keanu Reeves is playing Shadow. Great voice work from Keanu, for sure. The return of Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik. Let me say, for the grown-ups in the room, Jim Carrey was the reason to be there. I mean, without question, Keanu Reeves being cast was a highlight that helped me get there too. But it's like, you know, Keanu's going to be good. But it's like I haven't actually seen a Jim Carrey movie or show in a while. I know he's done some stuff. I feel bad. As much as I'm a fan of him, I haven't kept up with his work since Well, since when? Since he started going dramatic. But yeah, I haven't kept up with his work. He's done quite a few things. It took me a while to even see Kick-Ass 2. But Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik and Grandpa Dr. Robotnik, spoiler alert, he plays two Dr. Robotniks. One is the grandfather of his current character, and they actually achieve the look of the cartoon. I don't know how he looks in the game, but they achieve the look of the cartoon in this one. Yeah, he's entertaining as hell. Like, from every single second of Jim Carrey in this movie is worth watching. And same with Keanu Reeves. I think there's no doubt that the time is taken with their performances and with their scenes and their gags, where it's almost as if we're not really watching a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. That's just kind of there as a structure for us to enjoy listening to Keanu's voice with very good animation on Shadow, and really seeing Shadow have this character arc across the movie. That's, at first, it's so by the numbers I don't even care. I'm just happy to hear Keanu's voice. And then again, like I said, the payoff when we get to the finale of the movie, I was really happy with everything that had come to be. And again, with the double Dr. Robotniks, that was part of a selling point for me too, honestly. I love seeing, it's a nice throwback when actors playing multiple characters and interacting with themselves. It's a really fun throwback doing that kind of stuff. So to get double Jim Carrey, but okay, worth the price of admission. Worth the price of admission is, spoiler alert, because I didn't know it was going to happen. I didn't pay attention to the trailer, if it was in the trailer or not. There is a Dr. Robotnik dance in this movie where they have to do this Mission Impossible entrapment style sneaking into a vault or a safe. But for whatever reason, it becomes a ridiculous dance. And there's no doubt the entire theater was laughing and having a great time. That was everyone's highlight for the movie, at least as far as I could tell. It was such a blast watching Jim Carrey play with himself. And you know, so yes, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, really for kids, made for its audience, but for the adult viewer, the ending, I think, is satisfying, and it's and again, the everything with Jim Carrey worth the price of admission. And even, you know, as by the numbers as Shadow's setup is, the payoff, which is also by the numbers, is still done well. It's still, I felt something. I was like, oh, no way. And it's a testament to Keanu's power with his voice that now it's literally just his voice. I'm not used to hearing just his voice as anything. It's usually him killing someone over a dog, right? Nowadays. But, you know, it's a testament to his power as an actor that I've always thought he was a great actor. And I don't compare. He doesn't need to be Marlon Brando to be a great actor. That's Marlon Brando. He doesn't need to be Gary Oldman. You know, Christian Bale isn't Gary Oldman. Christian Bale's still great, right? You know, I don't need, and on the other side of that scale, Seth Rogen. I don't need Seth Rogen to be Christian Bale. You know, I think each actor is great for what they bring, however natural it is that they are. But I've always thought Keanu was a great actor, and what made that true for me was the movie The Devil's Advocate. If you're not a fan of Keanu's acting, because all you can see in your mind is Bill and Ted, well, watch The Devil's Advocate, and that is a fantastic Keanu film. I think there's so many things that actors try to do, or directors try to get actors to do in movies, that Keanu does. The dramatic screams, all these amazing emotional moments that he just totally nails in that movie. If you want to get a good look at his range, it's in that movie. And Speed as well. I think, as much as that movie is action packed and has gags, I think that's another one where his performance is really solid. Even though it's an action movie, he's got a lot of emotion going on, and I think it's pretty real and raw. But you have to get out of your head that whole Bill and Ted thing. But again, like I'm saying, that's what I was amazed with, that when we get to the end of this movie and there's the payoffs to Shadow's character having an arc, and you reach the end, I was really touched by, you just hear it in his voice when Shadow has a revelation, because he's a villain for the majority of the movie. I'm sorry, it's a kid's movie, spoiler alert. Actually, just spoilers. Spoilers here for Sonic the Hedgehog. It's a yes. Check it out if you're into that character and you enjoyed the first two. It's probably just more of the first two. I haven't seen the first two. But, just spoilers from here on out. There's this whole thread with the Shadow character that starts on very early on in the movie, where there's a flashback story. Shadow has been a captive experiment from the government, and in his many years of being a lab rat for the government, he befriends the daughter of the lead scientist of the situation, and they're such deep friends. It's almost romantic, but it's a really beautiful little friendship. And it ends up that the character, the daughter, ends up dying, and this is what motivates Shadow to be angry. But there's a little thing that we've seen in movies before, where the characters connect by looking at the stars. And there's after Shadow almost destroys the world, there's this very touching moment where we get the completed flashback, because the flashback is spread out across the movie, where old Dr. Robotnik was also a friend of that same girl, and he has the same motivation to destroy the world. But in this final flashback, it's in the final battle, and after the final battle, where Shadow has given a nearly fatal blow to James Marsden, thus sending Sonic into a revenge spiral. After their final battle, when Sonic decides not to kill Shadow, what's beautiful is when Shadow gives that fatal blow to James Marsden, and you're seeing Sonic on the floor sobbing over James Marsden, you do see the look of, oh crap, on Shadow's face, like that little sprinkle of humanity. The relating, because he relates to seeing his own dear friend dead or dying on the floor. What I thought was beautiful is when we get to the ending after the final flashback, and Shadow's frustrated that he doesn't get killed by Sonic over the same deal. They're fighting in space, so they're on the moon, and they look at the stars again, and it's a line that, as a fan of Watchmen, I've always loved Dr. Manhattan's montage, where he talks about the stars and how all we see of them is their old photographs. It's my favorite section, or my favorite chapter of the Watchmen graphic novel from Alan Moore. So I've always been a fan of that, but they bring that up as part of Shadow's arc, where he says, where when he's talking to his friend who dies, she tells him how we're seeing the light of stars, but they may have died many years ago, so we're really just seeing their light now. In this final confrontation, and when he's asking Sonic, why wouldn't you kill me? And Sonic's like, well, because that's not what my friend would have wanted. He wouldn't have wanted me to do that. And then that's when it occurs to Shadow, oh, and he's looking at the stars. So the star died, but the light still shines. And that, both the performance, the animated performance, and the line really hit me. And death has definitely been a part of my life in the last year or so. Quite a few people, dear friends dying. So it kind of hit in that way too. But I just thought that was such a nice, touching bit. Intermixed with all of the great Jim Carrey fighting himself sequences. Everything with Jim Carrey was so good. It's such a treasure seeing Jim Carrey being a goofball. It's like nobody does it better. But I truly hope that, just like Eddie Murphy coming back, but I hope Eddie Murphy too gets to do some new crazy zany thing if he wants to. But Jim Carrey is like, I hope he comes back big, because I think something has happened in the last 10 years where studios are so afraid of originality and voices, and so because they've produced mediocre products for us to watch on movies and television, we've all flocked to YouTube to watch podcasts where people do have exciting and interesting personalities and stories. I don't seem to be one of them so far, but I know I'm on YouTube myself. But I hope that some of these studios, or at least some of these artists, can grow the cojones, and if the studios won't let you, then make your own thing and put it on YouTube. Just put it out there, because we are all craving something good and fun, and I think Sonic the Hedgehog managed to do that. So hats off to Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I think the ending was the best part of that movie, and also Jim Carrey, the best part of the movie. The reason to see the movie is Jim Carrey versus Jim Carrey. Their whole arc and story is hilarious. And since we're on spoilers, the whole montage of them going on roller coasters and all that stuff, like, wow. Just wow. Again, we've seen it before, but because we haven't seen it with Jim Carrey and himself as his own grandpa, it has a special flavor that makes it wonderful. So thank you, Jim Carrey. Thank you, Keanu. Thanks the whole team. That was a fun ride. Okay, next movie, Scrooged. So I had the pleasure of watching Scrooged. I have never seen... Actually, I think I saw it as a kid, but it's been so long. There's so many actors that I recognized. I'm not going to get into it too much because there's a couple movies I really want to talk about. So I'm just going to blow through this one. Scrooged. Great take on the Scrooge storyline, where Bill Murray is a TV executive, and he's basically made a horrendous practical joke of the Scrooge of the Scrooge story by having the female dancers all showing their breasts and nipples and having insane violence and strange things occur, and everyone's upset with all of his changes because he's really just trying to be edgy for the sake of getting more attention, but it's not really the spirit of Christmas and the spirit of the story. And he experiences his own Scrooged storyline where ghosts visit him. The first ghost, who is his previous boss, a decrepit, falling apart corpse, blows through the doors and grabs him by the neck, and there's a fantastic effect. I don't know how they pulled it off. It was so well done, where the corpse hangs Bill Murray out of a window, but literally pushes him through a window without breaking it, in this amazing effect. The effects were fantastic in this movie. It's a wonderful 80s movie for effects, and a great story. Love the storyline with Marianne from Indiana Jones, who is his long-lost lover, who coincidentally and perfectly for the story is still single and not taken, and but she's the exact opposite. She's a volunteer, where he's becoming a tycoon. And it just says a lot that his long lost love is a volunteer. It says a lot about what's actually in his heart as opposed to how he behaves. So I really feel like Scrooged, if you haven't seen it, you gotta check it out. Not just a fantastic holiday movie, but a fantastic film altogether. A lot of familiar faces if you grew up in the 80s or 90s. You're gonna see so many actors you recognize. The one actor that he fires, I know I've seen him in a lot of movies. I'm forgetting his name right now. But he talks in a very strange way. You know what I mean? He fires him. Throughout the movie, you see the same actor try to get drunk many times, but somehow or other, fate makes him lose his glass or have his bottle stolen from him. And yeah, what a great actor, great scenes. Every actor is fantastic in this movie, and I forget her name too. Marianne from Indiana Jones, top notch. And the ending, the message of Scrooge is wonderfully delivered, and I really love movies like the Blues Brothers. Scrooge does this where it really ends with a huge speech and a huge song that's about everyone coming together and being kind and good to one another, and that Christmas isn't the only time to be generous to someone else, but you could do this every single day of the week and the world would be a better place. And that kind of messaging, I think, is so valuable. People are missing it. I think in this social media age, people are more selfish than they've ever been. Virtue signaling, videotaping themselves being good to people just to show off themselves being good to someone. You know, I think it's very weird. Like, if you're going to do something, do it. Don't count your deeds. I made that mistake myself as a younger man when I counted my good deeds, and I thought they mattered as a badge, as some kind of merit of me deserving to go to heaven or something. And I learned along the years, don't count your good deeds. If you want to do something good, do it because it needs to be done, and move on. You know what I mean? You're not here to collect trophies. You're here to do what needs to be done. So I really love Scrooge. Fantastic movie. Demon Knight. I saw Demon Knight. I think I saw it as a kid. we were just bouncing all over the place here. Demon Knight, Red Letter Media had brought up a number of times on their podcast across various episodes over the year. And finally, with just hanging out with my roommate, she throws it on. It's a great time. A real, it's not a throwback. It's in the time period of From Dusk Till Dawn, that type of, or John Carpenter's Vampires, the type of dirty, grungy 90s movie where, people living on the outskirts are struggling to survive, and at the same time this fantastic supernatural terrible event has occurred, and they're all trapped in their home, and all they have to do is ride out the night and fight these terrible demons that are trying to get just one of them to give up a relic that will allow them to take over the earth and wrap it in darkness. And it's really cool. William Sadler's great. I've finally learned his name. I've seen him many times. He's been in so many movies. Jada Pinkett Smith is great. Billy Zane is the demon knight, or the demon sent to get this relic from William Sadler, who's like this kind of anointed warrior across time, carrying this relic that specifically fights the demons. What a great gags, great effects. It's a Tales from the Crypt movie. If it wasn't in theaters, it should have been. Really solid picture. Jada Pinkett is so good. I see now what her career should have been if Hollywood wasn't Hollywood. You know what I mean? I think how she becomes the chosen one, spoiler alert, I don't care. She becomes the chosen one after William Sadler. But the movie does such a good job of laying out the temptations. So while we have this great cast of characters, one of them, I forget her name, but she was in RoboCop 3, she was in Face Off. I love this woman. Every time she shows up, she played Amanda Waller on the Justice League cartoon. I'm forgetting her name, but it will be here. She's just amazing. So many great actors on this show. So many great special effects with the creepy demons getting killed in various ways. This movie is so many things. And Billy Zane is such a delicious, fun, seductive villain. We have the actor who was in Small Soldiers, the delivery truck driver. He was also in Gremlins. He was in Terminator as the gun salesman that Arnold kills. And he has a temptation scene. Each of the characters is tempted by something. And you see there's a parallel to the temptations of Christ, which is where this all comes from. The relic is a flask that has the blood of Christ in it. So it's a really well-layered movie for being a B movie that's supposed to just be fun with crazy special effects. But it's really well layered with its meanings and its values. I think that's something about the movies that I'm talking about on this episode that is consistent. That each one of these movies has a theme or a value that's perfectly expressed through the storytelling of the movie. Storytelling always comes first. As I've said in my other reviews, each review typically tends to focus on one aspect of movies or that I feel makes the movie worth talking about in a podcast form or in any form really. But in this case, having a solid theme, the core idea, this is what I talk about with Star Wars, there's a core idea to why the story is being told. The reason the story is being told is the reason that the characters act the way they act. It's not just a movie about regular people. It's about people in a specific scenario talking about a specific issue. And the why is always present. And it's present in Sonic the Hedgehog. It's present in Scrooged. It's present in Demon Knight. Each one of these movies is about some kind of temptation or some kind of emotional problem that ultimately is solved by resisting the most obvious temptation, whether it's revenge in Sonic, resisting the desire for revenge, or Scrooge, the desire for the selfish desire, gluttony, or if it's Demon Knight, which is whatever your base sick desire is. Everyone's got some basic desire of what they want or who they think they want to be, and that basic desire is what the demons feed on and ultimately turn people against each other with in this movie. So very well layered movie for being a B movie, and again worth talking about for why it's great. So so those are just a few of the movies I want to talk about, but the special that I'm building up to is Nightbitch and The Substance. So this is what we're building up to. This is what I'm talking about next. There was a dream. A dream to be the world's next great director, starting with one glorious shot of my favorite soda pop. Oh, looks like my nephew wants to take a shot at me. Right in the face. Kind of refreshing, actually. But no, it must be stopped. did try. I tried to be one of the best of the best, and I will keep trying until I draw my last breath. Make your own opportunities. Forge your own path. It's all in my hands now. I believe. Thank you for everything. These ads is whack, man. Okay, now to wrap this up with the big event, what I really wanted to talk about for this episode. I saw Nightbitch and The Substance. And to prepare for this review, I also watched the... Here's the funny thing. Okay, let me back up here. I really enjoyed Nightbitch. For those of you who don't know the movie, Nightbitch is about Amy Adams, who plays a first-time mother. And she's put on a little weight, and she's a stay-at-home mom. And the whole experience has been incredibly draining for her, and she's kind of lost the feeling of being herself. But this movie is not only about those feelings, but at the same time, she might be turning into a dog. So it's a little bit of, I like to think of it as it's Teen Wolf meets motherhood. I imagine that was the pitch that sold the movie. It's a really good film. Amy Adams is fantastic. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like, this is the cinematic version of Amy Adams' episode on Smallville. I was a huge Smallville fan. I've talked about Talkville before. I've actually taken a little break from Talkville because I was watching it literally every week. And I was like, whoa, I just get overwhelmed. I can't watch too much of anything. No matter how good it is, at some point I got to take a break. But yeah, I love Talkville. I love Smallville. And season 1, episode 5, Craving, at least I think it was episode 5, it stars Amy Adams. She's the guest star. I think it's either, if it's not her first role, it's a very early role for her. And she, looking at IMDb, she did this just before doing Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio and Steven Spielberg. And in this episode of Smallville, she plays an overweight teen who's not eating, and she's obsessively drinking these sort of health drinks. She's dieting. She's doing whatever she can to lose weight, but it's not working. And I gotta say, this is kind of this is a cherished episode for me, but also I feel like I'm a superhero fan. And part of the reason I do this Why It's Great show, and part of the reason I appreciate certain superhero material over others is I think the true nature of any superhero show is to be a parable for how we should behave in the world. This is why I have a lot of respect for Star Wars, because a lot of people will dismiss it with those easy comparisons and say, oh, well, it's a fairy tale. It's just some fairy tale. But a fairy tale is not just a fairy tale. It's like the Bible. It's a religious parable that's supposed to speak to you about human nature and what your values should be as a person. That's why we keep retelling so many stories, like the story of Exodus. My favorite version of that is the Prince of Egypt. So, that's a very dramatic comparison, but that's really what these stories are about. You look at the Superman mythos in that first comic book where Superman came out, he's beating up politicians for being corrupt, and he's catching crooks, not just crooks who are regular criminals on the street, but crooks in higher positions of power who are doing things that are wrong. That's why that parable, that image has evolved from the politician to the businessman Lex Luthor, because this is where we see the source of corruption in our daily lives. So, looking at the episode Craving, where Amy Adams is an overweight teen, it was really nice to watch that again. And this came out in 2001 or 2002, I forget. But it's young Amy Adams, and you just see she is so good. I think at the time, everyone seemed like they were so good, but and of course they are. But now seeing Amy Adams has become a movie star. She's the most recent Lois Lane from the Zack Snyder films, and she does a great job. But I think, going back in time, seeing her at such a young age being so good, you see that she already had, whether it was training or whether it was natural, she always has these little looks and these little reactions to things that you see that she's both a thinking character, a thinking person, but also she's reacting to the scene. So she just has a very layered performance. When you see her saying these lines they're fine lines, there's nothing wrong with the dialogue. It's very straightforward. Her dad tries to tell her, stop drinking these health things, eat some real food. And which again is a message about real life, how, hey, everyone's body is different. Just because someone else can drink a vegetable V8 doesn't mean that's going to work for your body. And, better to be happy. Just eat something that you like, that's good for you, a little bit of steak or something, some eggs, something. That's better for you to be happy that way than to have this false sense of happiness because you're skinny and other people like you. But they're only liking you because of something that's superficial for them to appreciate. So that's sort of there's so many layers just to this episode by itself, But to me, I think that the fact that Smallville took the time to have this sort of, it's the Freak of the Week episode because of what she becomes, but the fact that this episode is taking its time to examine something that girls really do go through, and not just girls, but guys too, but especially young women, as they're growing up, have these terrible fears about their bodies and what people think about them. And these things are just only amplified as they get older, and people get more cynical and more selfish and all that good stuff. This episode of Smallville, unbeknownst to her, for those who haven't watched Smallville, the show starts off in 1989, my birth year, with a meteor shower that crashes down literally on Smallville, blowing up half the town. And some of the parents of the characters in the show are killed by this meteor shower. And even Lex Luthor is in a cornfield while his father, Lionel Luthor, is making a business deal. And a meteor crashes in that cornfield, and little red-headed Lex Luthor loses all of his hair. And what's cool is this episode, while being about Amy Adams discovering that for some reason her drink has started to make her lose weight. But it doesn't just make her lose weight over time, it makes her lose weight instantly. This meteor shower that happened in 1989 is actually from Krypton blowing up. And it's a very clever and smart way, both for the show and for the mythology, to disguise Clark Kent's ship crashing down on the planet, while also setting up how there's meteorite on Earth. Because in the movies, or I guess maybe even the comics too, it's always just some meteor rock that someone found somewhere. But there's never an actual incident that made kryptonite be here. So I thought this meteor shower was a wonderful device to explain both how nobody saw Clark Kent's ship crash, but also how how is kryptonite even on Earth in the first place. So it's very dramatically effective, but also it gives the television show a reason for there to be a Freak of the Week or some kind of superpowered foe for young Clark Kent to confront, so that he can learn his superpowers that he will later use as Superman. Now, unfortunately, the show has the issue of, because you're doing Freak of the Week, you get a lot of villains that are just easy alternate versions of villains he'll fight later. So it kind of makes it kind of makes Superman seem a bit lazier when he becomes Superman, because I've already fought you as young Clark Kent, and all I had to do was like zap you with electricity. It's like, wow, okay, it's not. It makes him less smart as an adult and more like, well, I've already done this, so. But it's okay. It's a show. But going back to Amy Adams' character, one of the consequences of this drink, she doesn't realize she's accidentally put meteor rock, and this is the source. This is what gives people their powers that Clark Kent has to fight every episode. One guy has a huge terrarium of bugs, and the terrarium crashes on him. In the terrarium are kryptonite rocks, and the bugs crash on him and bite him, and he absorbs their powers. Kind of like Spider-Man, except he gets the powers of multiple different bugs. And yeah, so that's one example. But in this particular episode, Amy Adams starts to suddenly like lose all of her weight, but it comes with the cost of she gets incredibly hungry, insatiably hungry, and to the point where she is driving at night and hits a deer, and then she goes out, and not only does she eat the deer, she eats it, but you see her jaw like a horror movie just separate, and it's freakish. And so there's a little bit of a monster tale going on here as well. It was a very good episode of Smallville. There's a whole subplot with Clark Kent being in love with Lana Lang, who has a boyfriend, and honestly, I'm tired of it now. Now that I've gotten older, and Talkville has rightfully convinced me how much better Clark and Lois are, and made me really appreciate Erica Durance's Lois. Now I'm like, what this pesky high school nonsense. Get this away from me. It didn't work out. I don't care anymore. Now I know where this relationship goes. I don't care anymore. But all the actors are fantastic. It's still good writing. But it's this freaky thing is happening with Amy Adams' character, where she is insatiably hungry, and there's a bully who picks on her when she's a little heavier, and literally knocks her green drink, green like kryptonite, knocks her green healthy drink all over her with a basketball. And he's a bully who makes her feel horrible about herself, and she eventually uses her monster side on him, because he's bullying her. He's about to bully her again, and then notices that she is slimmed down, and she's actually slimmed down to her actual weight. She's young Amy Adams is very thin, looks like a young model. She's gorgeous. She looks kind of like Nicole Kidman. But he's noticing how thin she is now, and he's checking her out, and she is going through a craving moment, and she's covering her body up with this big jacket, but then she kind of like recognizes he's checking her out, and she decides, oh, you like what you see? And so she allows him to take her off to somewhere where no one's going to notice, where no one's going to be around. In his mind, he's going to get some action. In her mind, she knows what she's going to do to him. And the scene is really good, where he's starting to hold her in an intimate way, and then her lines to him are, so you like me now? You like me how I look? And he's like, yeah. And both how dumb guys are, and how dumb this character is. You think she really wants to be with you after you've mistreated her so horribly all this time? But her lines to him are, you want me now, and you thought it was funny to make fun of me, didn't you? And he was like, yeah. But her next line is, you thought it was funny, making me think it'd be better for me to be dead than fat. And that line really got me. It's such a sad line, and it's such a sad perspective, but it's real. People do feel this way. this is why when I talk about Marvel and my frustrations with the Miss Marvel character, I think there's a missed opportunity to deal with body issues. I think the problem with Marvel is that they have forgotten the purpose of what they do. You know, yes, you're here for superheroes, people are here for brightly colored costumes and fun, and they got the fun part, but they forgot the parable aspect. Like, these should still be stories. These should still be stories about how people should be in the world. And as I've said, I've only read one Miss Marvel comic, but it was great, and it was about how Miss Marvel had body issues, and she was a very, very thin. In her case, it's the opposite, where Miss Marvel was a very, very scrawny, thin Pakistani girl. And at the time, you know, there was a little bit less diversity in marketing and media. And she thought the ideal vision of what she should look like was a voluptuous blonde woman. And so she tried to turn herself into that. And it ended up backfiring on her, and she became this kind of weird looking Mr. Fantastic version of herself. And the whole issue, she's trying to snap herself back to her normal form, because it was such a mistake to try, a painful, awful mistake to try and alter herself. And that to me is a really good story for people, men and women, because we all go through body dysmorphia. Not everybody, but a lot of people go through body dysmorphia. I mean, yeah, I'm talking about how I'm fat now, but I've always looked down and seen this weight, even when I was younger and in my 20s and thin. I always looked down and I saw this massive gut. It was always there, you know what I mean? So people feel these ways about themselves that are sometimes not even true, and then they go to these extremes that hurt themselves in order to please other people, to please the fear of disappointing the public perception, you know, which is ridiculous. There's a place where public perception is a good thing, and there's a lot of places where it's not even valuable to you. And I think when it comes to your appearance, it's back and forth. Like, yes, you should dress nicely for a job interview, but at the same time, you shouldn't care whether people, you know, in your classroom think you're cute with glasses or not. You know, it's just, there's these things that are just not necessary to worry about. And sometimes we don't figure it out until it's too late. But that's why I love this episode of Smallville, bringing it back. I'm sorry, I'm the Tangent Man. That really should be my podcast name, The Tangent Man, because I tangent so much. But these are the connections why this episode of Smallville is so strong. Because it is a parable about how Amy Adams sees herself, and her pathway is so draconian toward herself that ultimately the only ending to doing that to yourself is that you do become a monster. And so, you know, I was talking to my roommate. We saw The Substance as well, and so Nightbitch and The Substance are really what I'm getting to. And I really feel like this episode of Smallville was like this brilliant precursor that kind of identified both movies at the same time. But yeah, Craving, excellent episode of Smallville. But yeah, she ends up eating the bully and sucking all of his fat out. That's her power. She's not absorbing fat anymore. She doesn't have the meteor rock has absorbed her fat per her wish, but now her metabolism is craving fat, which I don't know how these characters figure out, but they're much smarter than an average high school kid. But yeah, so that ends up being her thing. She becomes a monster to eat fat. That's why she ate the deer. That's why she ate the bully. And it comes to a head at the end of the episode where she almost eats Clark Kent's best friend, Pete. But, you know, conveniently, she knocks him out first so that Clark Kent can fight her and save the day without Pete seeing his superpowers. So that's great. But yeah, it was a great episode of Smallville, and I think it's not just great because Amy Adams is in it and she's talented, but I think as an episode, it has a very clear message about what it's about. And it's about body image, it's about liking yourself for who you are, and not judging your entire life based on what other people think, because that's just a pathway to misery. So that being the sort of foundation here, let's talk about Nightbitch and The Substance, which I think are both of these movies I think are very connected, and they're kind of two sides of the same coin when we're talking about women and body issues and self-perception and public perception. First off, Nightbitch, it was weird because we watched it all on the same day, Nightbitch and The Substance. Nightbitch, for those who don't know, stars Amy Adams as a first-time mother, and she's put on a little weight, and she's a stay-at-home mom. Her husband is out of town for 4 days out of the week because he's in business of some kind. And throughout the course of the movie, Amy Adams is revealing in these very odd but cool, I don't know cool is the word, but it's very odd but interesting cuts where she's sort of having this monologue to herself, and sometimes she's saying it to another person, but you see with this vignetting, it's what she wishes she said to this person instead of what she actually says. And she has these little monologues where she's talking about how motherhood is so draining, and she feels like she's lost who she is. She used to be a very talented artist that all of her friends and her husband respected, and now she's a stay-at-home mom and she doesn't do any of that stuff anymore, but the desire to do it is still there. But at the same time, she loves her son and wants her son to have the best everything. So it was a really, really good movie. I like how like I said, it's Teen Wolf meets motherhood. So there's so many. If you've seen Teen Wolf, I didn't review it, but I did see it last year and for the first time, and it was great. It was essentially Teen Wolf was essentially Spider-Man, but he's a werewolf. That's a really fun, great movie. I think the ending's pretty good, but it's about body issues. It's about public perception. It's about are you doing this because other people like you for it, or are you doing it because you like it? And it's a very crucial question that we all need to ask for those of us worried about what other people think, And in the case of Nightbitch, she's turning into a dog, not a wolf. But the whole time, it's so subtle and slow. At first, she sees just a little bit of fur above her butt crack, and then later on, she has multiple nipples, and it's like, what? And the husband is Scoot McNairy. I hope I got his name right. Who was in Speak No Evil, where he also plays a bit of a lame guy. In both movies, he's kind of a lame dude, and it's kind of like, are you being typecast? Are you asking for these roles? I mean, you're making me not like you. I'm starting to get concerned here, sir. Next one, play a cool husband. I mean, you don't have to be rich. Just play a better husband on the next one. Because now I'm going to start to think every time I see you, it's going to be, let's slap that guy. But yeah, so Nightbitch, I think it's a really good movie. I think more in the vein of Smallville, it's relatable, and it's about sort of the domestic normal kind of life, and not that it's normal for everybody. Not everyone's a stay-at-home mom because their husband makes a lot of money working somewhere else. But it's relatable in the sense of just the struggle of trying to raise a kid perceptively by yourself, or essentially by yourself, and trying to still have that desire to be whoever it was that you were before motherhood. Oh my God. And she has these college friends who she meets, and they're kind of pretentious, and they're doing much better than she is in terms of having that work-life balance or that dream-life balance with parenthood. And it's only because they have enough money to have a nanny. And then you see that she makes friends with these other moms who are also stay-at-home moms, but they all kind of share that same feeling of, man, when I was younger, I used to be different, or there's something that I wish I could have now that I don't have. And they just relate to her better. They're not pretentious and full of themselves. They too are looking for someone who reflects that same struggle. And I love the other moms. They're great. They're good characters, great actresses. But it's a really, touching meditation. The whole movie, because it goes into these voiceovers and these monologues, becomes like a very nice, touching, I don't want to say quaint, but it's domestic, it's relatable. It's a meditation on motherhood and what it does to you, and also growing up. I think it's relatable to me, although I'm not a mother, obviously. I've been a very good uncle. I've helped raise my nephew from the day he was born, for the first 3 years of his life, so that my sister could work, and it was a beautiful experience, but it was very draining, and that was sort of the beginning of me understanding or having a new sense of values, because for the previous 10 to 15 years since I was 15, I had discovered that I loved filmmaking, and I wanted to be a filmmaker, and everything I did was about being that. And that's why I talk so passionately about movies, because still to this day, I'm always studying movies and trying to get, where's the filmmaker coming from? Because that's the real truth that no reviewer can tell you. Where is the filmmaker coming from? If you can understand that, then you can understand the movie. I very much am a believer in films and what good they can do for people. But it was in that time I had just made 007 I Only Need One, which won awards, and it was very cool, but it was a grueling, painful experience. But it was also the first time I'd been recognized. It was the first time I made something that won awards. I didn't even submit other work to festivals before, although I'd been making videos for 10 years before that. But it was the first time I got recognized, and people told me, hey, that's a real movie. Thank you, Del Weston. But yeah, but in the time of raising my nephew, which was after making that movie, it was like a whole new set of values. It was, I'm not important. This kid is important. This kid needs to make it to tomorrow. I need to make sure he's fed. I need to make sure his butt is wiped. You know what I mean? I need to make sure he's entertained, and at the same time, I've mentioned this before, my mom had cancer literally at the same time. Luckily, better now. Oof. But it was a lot to deal with all at once. And I was literally also working a real job for the first time. So I'd work overnight for 8 hours, come home, watch my nephew for 8 hours. And for the first 3 months of his life, that was exactly what that was. Not that there wasn't other help too, but that's basically what my life was at that time. Plus taking my mother to the hospital, things like that. But it was really a value change for how I saw the world and how I saw myself, because I think, the notion of fatherhood, sure, whatever, I guess, but for the first time in my life, I was taking care of a baby, and it was a totally different thing. And it was the first time in my life I felt like, wait, maybe movies aren't everything, and maybe the dream isn't everything. Maybe just like Spider-Man 2, sometimes you have to put your dreams to the side to do what's right and to take care of what matters, So that was the whole thing I was going through. So I'm really sitting here, even though I'm not a mom, relating to Amy Adams' adventure through motherhood, because it is, even though it's specifically about motherhood, it's also about adulthood, it's also about parenthood. And just as a human and just as a person who's been through something somewhat similar. I really felt that for the first 3 years of my nephew's life, that I felt like, man, I'm not making movies anymore. I'm not doing this or that anymore. Well, maybe I can podcast, so I can still be somewhat involved with movies. And I was just so touch and go with it. And literally until this past year, I was never fully committed to making this podcast and talking about movies the way I felt they should be spoken about, which is what's their meaning, what are they going for, what are the technical aspects that should be appreciated about this movie. Because I think most reviews are just some emotional gut reaction from people who don't make movies and who don't analyze them. You know, the movie Birdman is about Michael Keaton as this washed up film star who's now trying to put on a play that he wrote himself, and nobody respects him because they all see him for his last role that he did, which was Birdman 3, which was a box office failure, and they just see him as a movie star who is trying to do something. And there's this character who is a critic, and he meets her in a bar, and she's the kind of critic that makes or breaks plays. And she tells him, I'm going to destroy your play because this is ridiculous that you think that you can just come down from the Hollywood Hills and try to play in our field. And so he snatches her notes out of her hand and says, look at this. This play is egregious. It sucks, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing in your notes about the structure or the themes or what the story's about. Or the performances. There's nothing about the actual play. It's just you shitting on my play. And his critique of the critic is so intense. But that is when I realized what my podcast should really be about. It should be about what are the themes? What are the aspects of the story that people don't talk about in reviews because they're too busy having some personal vendetta against the filmmaker and not actually looking at the story. And really the vendetta is not against the filmmaker, it's against whatever personal, political, or vice issue that this reviewer has, and it has nothing to do with the movie at all. And that's why I've stopped watching a lot of podcasts. And you know what? I'm not going to name the names. But, you know, that's why I've stopped watching a lot of podcasts, because I'm like, you know what? You people are just having some kind of angle that you're playing, and you know this angle gets you the views, and I don't really trust you or want to hear your negative comments, because really you're just saying the same thing every episode. Yam, yam, yam. You're not talking about the movie. You're talking about some political, atmospheric bullshit that has nothing to do with the movie. And because it's gaining you views, you just keep saying it every single video, whether or not it really applies to the movie you're talking about. And I think that's bullshit. And that's why I wanted to make this podcast. But again, that's the strength. This is what I'm talking about with Nightbitch. It's not just some movie where a mom turns into a dog. It's a movie about how we do change. It's about how our lives change and our priorities change. And what are we going to do with it when we realize that we've given up something of ourselves to make someone else? It's very powerful stuff. And I think Nightbitch really deserves some kudos for how well it's made. I think it's a very strongly made picture. I did look up the director's names. I forgot to write them down. I'm going to put the director's name right here. This is about her. She's directed 4 films and 3 television episodes. So she's really got experience under her belt. She also wrote the movie, and it was based off of a book, I believe, or inspired by a book. Really good movie. Really good movie. Amy Adams is great as always, but you know, it made me want to go back and watch the Craving episode, where now I really appreciate what she had to give in that episode and realized, man, her talent was always there. It was always shining. She just wasn't in bigger pictures yet. So it's really wonderful to have that kind of different perspective. And I thought Amy Adams, I think this is my favorite performance of hers that I've seen. I mean, of course, she was good as Lois, and I know I've seen her in other stuff where she was great. I loved her in Catch Me If You Can. But I think this is my favorite performance of hers that I've seen yet, because she's so real. And what I love, even going back to Craving, her little naturalisms, her little realisms, how she plays a character where she's also always, the character is thinking. Maybe that's just something she does, but the character's always got something in their mind. And I really love that she always plays these multiple levels, like a real person, kind of like a neurotic or neuroses, like a real person is active. And because stories are about stories are about the time that we go through something, they're not about the time we don't go through something. That's why I shit on Acolyte. Who cares about the time that you're not going through anything where no one's challenging you? That's not interesting. Real stories are about something you're going through, about a time where you either need to change or you need to reflect on yourself a little bit and figure out what you're doing. That's why Blade, although it's an action movie and it's unstated, is such a strong picture, because Blade is going through a huge emotional issue that he's expressing through the action. He's expressing his issues through violence, but he is going through something very personal. So, you know, and Wesley Snipes is so great because he also plays that internal thought, but so naturally, as it's just a part of his physical behavior. Like that, Snipes is, you know, he does not get enough credit for what a talented actor he is, and very, very strong producer and storyteller. Because you look at the commentaries and interviews of those Blade movies, I mean, in particular the first two, because, you know, we know Blade 3 is marred with a lot of stuff, but, you know, forget all that. I'm just talking about the man and what he brings to the table. And it's like, you look at his interviews, like he has a perspective on storytelling, on filmmaking, that was incredibly informative for me and how I look at movies. I would never appreciate Birdman and that little speech without Wesley Snipes having his own perspective on what action movies should be about and what action scenes should be about. Because he's theatrically trained, he has the training, right? He's trained to know what storytelling itself needs. So looking at Nightbitch, although it's more domestic and relatable, it's really this really beautiful meditation on motherhood and adulthood and transformation. Much in the vein of all my favorite superhero stuff, which is it's parabolic. It's about something greater than just the simple premise of turning into a dog. So I just wanted to give my kudos to Nightbitch. Great, really great little movie. It's such an understated film, but it's also, it's not really understated because he does verbalize everything in some form. But, you know, it's a perfect use of voiceover because it's all what the character's thinking and saying and feeling, but it's not one bit of it is unnecessary. It's all we're in the headspace of the character. So very, very great film. Great hats off to the director and the casting crew, and Amy Adams, of course, who just brought it. Because after seeing Nightbitch, I could now see what Amy Adams has always done, going back to Craving, the 5th episode of Smallville. I really appreciate her performance as an actress. And I think I am also just in that funky place where I've studied directors for 10 years or more than that. And now that I've kind of gotten a feel for different directors' styles and ways of doing things, now I'm in the period of now I'm actually appreciating what actors do. Because actors do what directors can't do, which is perform this crazy shit. You know what I mean? So just hats off to Amy Adams, special hats off to that. Now that I've talked about Smallville and now that I've talked about Nightbitch, I'm going to go actually into part 2. Part 2 will be the next video that's all about the substance. But I am saying it as a part 2 because I do feel like all of these movies are connected. So, check it out and I'll see you on the next one.